Hi everyone! Welcome back to Sashay Away with Barry. It has been a while since I've done a video. I took a little break from this because nothing was really happening since DragCon, and here I am back. We're going to have a lot of content coming up because Drag Race is starting up again. All Stars will be happening in December, plus the Ohni Lisle Christmas Spectacular, whatever that is going to be happening. So we'll have some videos coming up very, very soon. But first, I want to share with you what I did tonight. I went to an event that was actually at my work, the LGBT Center here in New York City, with Miss Sasha Velour. She had a panel discussion and book signing for her new book that came out. It is called Velour Drag Magazine. And those of you who don't know, she produces a drag magazine. There have been three, I want to call them episodes, but that is TV. There's been three of them. And they've all been bound into this lovely hardbound book that you can get probably online. I know it's being sold at bookstores. If you're in New York, you can get it at the bookstore at the LGBT Center. It's on the second floor, room 210, and you can get it there. I know it's being sold at a bookstore in LA. It's being sold actually in a bookstore in Glasgow, Scotland. Some people reached out and they're selling it there, but it is also available online. So you can go to the Sasha Velour website and probably order it there. But if you're in New York, stop by the LGBT Center. It is the Bureau of, oh my god, I have to pull this out because I don't know what it's called. It's the BGSQD, Bureau of General Services Queer Division. That's what it is, Bureau of General Services Queer Division. I should know that. I work there. I see these people every day, so I should know that. It's a great little bookstore. You should all, if you're in the area, you should just go in and check it out anyway. They have a lot of great stuff in there, and it's the only LGBT bookstore left in Manhattan, so go visit it. Anyway, so I went to this panel discussion and book signing, and it was really, really fantastic. It was really interesting. Great things were said. A lot of it is about the book, so it'll give you a little sneak peek into what that is. I took some videos, but not the whole thing, because I wanted to enjoy myself as well. I wore this fabulous new frock that I got. It is kind of this weird fashion. It was a big hit, I'm gonna say that. People there loved it. It is a flannel shirt, clearly, that has been overly sequenced, but you can't see the bottom of it, but it is all cut up. There'll be some pictures if you watch through this whole thing, you'll see the pictures of it that I'm gonna put in here as well. But it is kind of like a poncho and a cape and a flannel shirt all in one. It is very masculine, feminine kind of crossover, and I love it. I bought it at a Housing Works event, and it is a fantastic little piece of fashion that I have. I don't have a lot of fashion things. I have a lot of clothes. This to me is fashion because it is so weird and bizarre. But enjoy the video. I will see you next time when we talk about Drag Race. There'll be a Meet the Queens coming up soon, I hope. I just have to find someone that wants to talk about the Queens with me to discuss it. But I will see you soon. Enjoy the video. Bye!
Starting just past Sasha. This panelist is an illustrator and art director whose clients have ranged from independent musical artists, Refinery 29, Spotify, and the New York Times. A solo gallery show of her work entitled I Am Her, She Is Here, We Are Here is opening on November 27th at the Cooler Gallery in Brooklyn. That's by the Navy Yards, so don't miss that. She holds a degree from the University of North Texas in interdisciplinary arts and design studies. She created illustrations on top of historic photos for the 3rd issue of the magazine, and also created the front and back cover of her very first issue, which Sasha is cosplaying right now. Please welcome the immensely talented and gorgeous Ohni Lisle. Our next panelist is a queer poet and drag performance artist living in Brooklyn. They received fellowships from the New York Foundation of the Arts, Kundiman, Lambda Literary, and the Asian American Writers Workshop. They're a standing member of the drag burlesque collective Switch and Play, and have performed at venues including the Whitney, MoMA PS1, Joe's Pub, National Sawdust, New York Live Arts, and the Brooklyn Museum. They were born in Macau, China, and are currently an MFA candidate in poetry at NYU. Allow me to introduce Pearl Harbor. Our next panelist is a queer femme nightlife performer and academic. She's a member of Brooklyn Drag Collective Switch and Play and was named Best Femc at the Brooklyn Nightlife Awards in 2018. When she isn't bringing high femme lesbian camp to dive bar stages, she is completing a dissertation on queer representation in pulp paperbacks and softcore pornographic novels in the 1950s and 60s. Thank God there are people doing that kind of work in academia. Her scholarly writing is forthcoming in GLQ, a journal of lesbian and gay studies, and the Global Encyclopedia of Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer History. For Velour, she created 2 thoughtful group conversations, Boop and Sing It From the Rooftops, which appeared in the 2nd and 3rd issues collectively. Give it up for Miss Malice. Walking up the stage right now, darling. Our next guest is one of the original mothers of the House of Bushwig, a Tejana from the El Paso Ciudad Juarez border. This queen uses her performances to teach us all about community. She's a career advancement coach for the Work Readiness Customer Service Program, a job placement program for young people who are out of school and out of work. She holds a master's in performance studies from the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU, where she studied under the esteemed Jose Esteban Munoz. For Velour, they lended their voice to the group conversation Boop in the 2nd issue, Lady Quesa Dilla. So our last panelist is my partner, who doesn't need an introduction, but I want to fill you on some things you may not know about her. As a visual artist, her work has been the subject of 2 solo gallery shows in New York, and they were asked by Google to create the Google Doodle in honor of Marlene Dietrich last year. In September of this year, she collaborated with the New York brand Opening Ceremony to produce, direct, and host their Fall New York Fashion Week show, better known as a Gift of Shows, which put an all-queer cast on stage in front of celebrities and fashion insiders and garnered impressive reviews from Time Magazine and the New York Times. Her show Nightgowns, partially inspired by the first issue release party, which a lot of you were at, has played to huge crowds in LA and sold out crowds in London and New York. The show was at max capacity before Drag Race was a thing on our horizon. You didn't cut this. You said you wanted me to cut it, and you didn't do it. You know that she was a Fulbright scholar, but she holds a master's degree in cartooning from the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, the town where we met. And kind of long before becoming a drag queen, they were creating and selling their own zines and comics as a part of their own economy. They taught English at a small language school before becoming head of production for Toon Books in New York, laying out every book the company created and overseeing production. And then became a freelance graphic designer as her drag career took off. She's always applied things that she learned from work to her craft. There was, I think, of a time when we didn't even know if she should be wearing Nosferatu ears all the time as Sasha, but she knew how to like lay out a book and lay out a magazine, so that's what she did, and that's the kind of drag she was doing, because that's what she knew how to do. She's not only the artistic director and co-creator of Velour, she is a one-stop shop production. She designed the logo, laid out every piece of text, photo edited, acted as editor, design consultant on pieces, came up with themes, picked artists to feature, put artists together with other artists to work together. The one and only Sasha Velour.
my answer is a little similar in that so when I see the cover, that transports me back to when I was making it, and just at the time I had a day job working retail, and now I am a full freelance illustrator, and so it's kind of so cool to see how all of our dreams have come true, even when we were like posturing at the time.
Yeah.
So it makes me nostalgic for before, and it makes me really happy to know that we've come so far.
The journeys that we've all been on since working on this initially.
And I got a lot of work from that cover. A lot of people were actually like, "We like this 3D," because remember I was like,
you weren't doing that style.
yeah, I was like, I want to play around with this like 3D, and you guys were like, we love it. And then so now I've gotten so many jobs like, can you do your 3D style? And I'm like, okay. So it's kind of a fun tidbit that it became like a financial thing.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I feel so lucky. I mean, 5 years, 5 or 6 years. Remember when you first reached out to me and you said, we want poetry in this, and to be have been included in Velour, aka previously been, in all these different ways as a poet. In the first issue, I had some sonnets in there. In the second issue, we have portraits of me, and I remember looking back today on these images when I was like 23 or something, and at the time I was facing deportation trials that my family and I were like fighting, spending like all of our money, all of our emotional energy. And I remember looking at these photos and seeing like this is a person in a lot of pain and trying to channel a lot of beauty through pain. And I remember looking at these beach photos and thinking I was so depressed back then, and how much energy and how hard it was for me to like even just get out there and look the best I could. Last week I gave a poetry reading, and when you get poetry readings, between all of your sad poems, you have to like give this banter, to like soften the mood. And I remember just kind of blurting out, I think I'm healing. And it sounded like a joke when I said it, and then I stopped myself. I was like, wait, and I told the audience, that sounded like a joke, but I wasn't joking. I didn't really think I am healing right now. So doesn't healing look great?
It looks gorgeous, darling.
It really does, Pearl. It looks so good on you. Yeah, I need to echo a few things that have already been said, even just thinking about what you're saying about documentation at a particular moment in your life. I was thinking so much in revisiting what this book is looking like and what all of the material looks like, encapsulated in the beautiful hardcover moment, what it means to move from the sort of ephemeral quality of the stapled zine to the beautiful art book, which feels kind of like an act of drag in itself, right? In the sense that I often think of drag, or the resistance that we act out in drag, as being sort of saying this body is worthy and important. We need the spotlight, right? That this abject body deserves glamour and celebration. And I feel that this transformation kind of enacts that full circle. And that even from the first issue, Vim, which I feel really emotional about because that's how we met. That's how we met, and we had similar ideas. That's how Switch and Play and Sasha and Johnny started collaborating. So we had these sort of similar visions of what world could be possible. It's just really valuable to have this book kind of announce that, and that was always part of the mission. It was always conscious and intentional from the very first about documenting, preserving, right? This sense that this record of what's happening right now, and this sense of casting back in history, that we need a record of both of these things. And so it's powerful to see it come full circle.
I think also intentionally trying to make it as beautiful as it could possibly be, because there's so few representations of our queer people in publications, in magazines, and in books and things like that. Not just like putting it in something that you can like take and give to your grandma, but making it gorgeous, because we're deserving of that kind of beauty and representation that we don't always get. That's cool.
Yeah.
Buenas noches. Oh my goodness. Well, for me, it's like this beautiful journal that, Johnny and Sasha have kept. and you all are finally catching up. Because, like, no shame, like, we've been doing great stuff for such a long time, right? And in this magazine, we see that trajectory. So to see Sasha elevate herself to this, you know, amazing goddess, you know, which I always do because she's my best friend. You know, so to see it in this form, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. I'm excited of what's next. But most importantly, like it has been said, you know, the importance of having these stories, of actually having a magazine. And also, I feel that was Sasha's way of just having the best pickup line, right? Because she could go up to anyone and be like, hey, do you want to be a part of my magazine? And like, who's gonna say no to that?
We met so many people that way.
Yeah,
That's
it was
how
a
we
perfect
met.
way to actually meet people in the community, because it was like, we have a project, we're working on a project. That's always how I meet people. We have to be working together. That's all I do is work.
You don't get me Sasha Velour's friend that's working with her. That's not true, she's lovely. Anyone who's met her would say so. I'd like to know, and you don't all have to answer, but if there's any of you who have a piece other than a piece that you worked on in the magazine that really strikes you. We don't have to go down the line, just anyone who is anxious to speak, feel free.
I really like Wu Chan's poem, or sonnet, My Mother's Bra. That was a really, I feel like a lot of people can share the experience of like your first interaction with presenting femme or feminine articles is your mom's stuff. So it just really struck a chord, I think, for people that have shared that really sweet and kind of creepy moment.
Heartbreaking too, in a way. Oh, would you read it?
Right now?
Would that be okay? Not right now, maybe in a minute after somebody else comes. Maybe a minute to read, but would you mind? It's really beautiful. I love it.
I can read it.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous piece.
My mother's bra. Limp, coarse, and unpadded, my mother wore the same bra for years. Years I watched it fade, white cotton lace stained cream gray in a frame that refused to fold. She never bought more. The first time I slipped it on, I was 8. I burst into the kitchen, mischievous as I was, and her face curled in disgust. She yelled. I watched my breast evaporate. Last week, I bought my first bra, clearance, black and double padded. An extra large band for a girl with a rib cage built like a ship's. My lips, though, we don't talk, are hers, thicker even. How could she detest me? Look at us together, sexy.
I love that poem so much.
Yeah.
I love the look at us part.
Somewhat related, but very different. Your piece on your mother, Gone. Oh, I'm reading it again today. Just they're like photo essays or like photo poems, you know, the alchemy between the word and the image, the word and the portrait. Sometimes when you're on Instagram, you scroll and drag has become so image heavy and so portrait heavy that like I don't know what I'm looking at anymore. But to see the handwriting next to the image was like this antidote where like everything made sense and it became so close, you know, like it brought the image so close to my heart. So thank you for that. Thank you for that so much.
Yeah, we were both very depressed working on that issue, I think, in whatever year that was. And it was interesting turning to, it's hard to put on makeup and go out into actual daylight. Both of these shoots were daylight public shoots. The one I did about my mom was actually in and around the center and this block.
On the street.
And it is painful to like put that on and make yourself so vulnerable when you're already going through so much personally. But I think that act of healing and the feeling that like working on an art piece with other people, with a stylist and a photographer, and everyone's kind of there for transformative art was really, it did heal me.
And I think, and also because you had just lost your mom, and she was the copy editor of our first issue. That's what she did. She was an amazing editor and copy, and she copy edited the first issue, and I think the one time she saw you perform was at the launch party for the first issue that we did in Illinois. So to get to grieve that experience in the magazine was kind of important too.
Yeah. Yes. As in all like kind of queer projects, there's a lot of ghosts and spectrality in this magazine. Hopefully it does feel haunted in a good way by like the ancestors, both personal blood and our collective queer ancestors that we do have to do a constant active honoring.
Speaking of that, I'd love to highlight one of my favorite pieces, which is the spell book created by April, an untitled queen.
April, who's here?
Yes.
No, she's okay. We won't point her out.
Okay.
She's here.
Somewhere in this room. Speaking of haunted. But I actually wanted to read an excerpt from it because I think one of the most beautiful things we can do for these pieces is just get them in the room right now and really experience them. So this comes from Spell for Ensnaring a Snake Sister. First, choose your target wisely. You may know her already. You may have just met. It will not be a mystery. It's in the way her laugh rings harmoniously with yours, your mutual language of inside jokes and knowing glances, how you would have been friends if you had met as children. A feeling and a knowing. This is your sister. It's just a truly beautiful piece about queer intimacy, about friendship, right? And that I also love it just because of how visible they are as collaborators, so that their hands are framing these objects.
Their actual hands hold up. They created the zine, and you can see their hands holding the zine. We like photographed the zine that they created.
Yeah, just have it them be so visible as collaborators and makers of that piece as well is really profound.
Yeah, so.
For me, it would have to be the Realness by Laurel Leak. The comment that is attached to it as an educator, to me, that's like a go-to, right?
She did this essay about, the third issue was about realness. The second issue, and she created this like comic essay about the word.
Right, so it's talking about realness, Paris is Burning, RuPaul's Drag Race. It just encapsulates everything in such a great way that, again, for me as an educator, for the record, I used to be an employee of the LGBT community center right here in this building, and it is like, no shit, it's a fact, right? It's a fact. This is my first time back, and it's so funny, yes, clap for me.
After bravery today, after bravery.
So, this would just be like a great way to have a conversation with my young people about Paris is Burning, right? About realness. And it's just, I love it, I love going back to it.
Same.
She does such an amazing job of talking about realness and being critical of Paris is Burning while still extracting all of the value that we get from the voices who are documented in Paris is Burning.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I was gonna call out the essay that Laurel wrote for the first issue, and Laurel went to the Center for Cartoon Studies with April and I, and we all sort of learned about the history of drag together when we should have been working on our graduate theses. So I was like following Manila Luzon's makeup tutorial every night. But this essay called Defining Drag, like it really does kind of catch it all, and it's poetic. I want to read some of it.
I was like weeping reading this morning. This whole piece.
Drag is the artful rendering of gender and identity presentation, all played out on the stage of the body. Drag is the embracing of fakery, the cunning mimicry of binaries that reveals the lie, the deception that reveals a truth, the contradictory honesty of performing as whatever self you can invent. Drag is a fundamentally queer art form, present in all cultures, in all eras, in all imaginable shades and shapes of identity. And then she says, after talking about the idea of transformation, people's obsession, reliance with gender transformation, she writes, truly the most powerful transformation of drag is that of a performer demanding and receiving acceptance of their personal reality from their audience. The room is what becomes transformed, not necessarily the transformer, not necessarily the performer. Actually, that is what they call drag performers in Russian, I was told. Transformator. Transformers. Perhaps they transform themselves into an iconic being, perhaps simply by stepping onto a stage or into a spotlight, that then provokes transformation and transgression in the audience. And that has those paragraphs have so shifted how I saw drag and the importance. I think those really set out a kind of philosophy of communal experience of drag, that what defines drag isn't necessarily what you're putting on or how that changes you, but actually all of this that's happening here.
Who you're putting it on next.
This is what defines drag, and I think that's why in trying to capture that for a page, that really pushed us throughout every issue following to do so much more than just take a picture of a performer and put them in a magazine or do an interview with them, but really try to capture all of those unspoken connections and interchanges that are happening every time a performer enters a room or performs in front of a set of eyes or an audience.
Yeah, I think there's actually, you said something very similar, Pearl, in the second issue in Food that I'll bring up later. I've got a question on transformation, I'll bring it up, but you kind of echoed a similar sentence. It's been like kind of a theme that I noticed throughout the whole book. Yeah, actually, we can skip right to it, actually. So, Velour fights back against the false idea of drag as a cis gay art form and shows that it hasn't been for a long time. How have you seen that idea evolve in the mainstream since the zine first came out 5 years ago? Anyone on the thoughts? I think for me, I've seen more stories making it out into the world, but when I reread Laurel's essay that she wrote 5 years ago, I'm still like, this is so relevant right now. In Jen Kemper's comics from the 80s, so relevant right now. Like, all of it is still like pressing and needs to be spoken about, I feel. Anybody else?
We were remembering when we chose the name Velour, or Vim, I guess. That was what we actually chose after like a huge decision, and it was purposeful. A lot of just queer magazines at the time had very exclusionary titles that really made it sound like it was just a magazine for cis men. Like really kind of mask-heavy titling or gay-focused titling. I'm not gonna throw anyone under the bus, but you all know what I'm talking about. And so choosing a magazine that like literally from the name felt inclusive or non-binary even was very, very purposeful, and so that everyone who would get to feel a part of it wasn't necessarily like, there wasn't a main focus and then side focus. It was all meant to be open and non-binary.
Well, I remember asking people for suggestions, and everyone was coming back with all these like really drag queen pun type things, and it's like, what about kings? What about drag performers who aren't queens? Like, and I remember sitting outside of Super French in our neighborhood, just like having coffee, like sweating before Sasha went to work to teach English, being like, what are we gonna call this thing? How are we gonna do this?
Well, Vim was not perhaps the catchiest title in the world, but it was good for that staple dish.
Yeah, people were like, Vine, you wanna start Vine in my bookstore?
VYM, usually. Yeah.
I remember, I guess almost 10 years ago in college, going to drag shows in Dallas. The Rose Room was like pretty trans-heavy queens, and so like that's pretty regional. I mean, for me, I don't really know if that's really talked about and showcased in other parts of the country.
I think it is regional. I know Oklahoma City was,
Yeah.
there was a lot of trans women in the drag scene there,
Yeah.
and Louisville and places like that, but.
Yeah, so I think being this magazine show like lets everyone know this exists, you know, and it's like, unfortunately, there's not a ton of like, I feel like Sasha's pioneering a lot of the showcasing.
I think it's just like a shift that's happening more generally. There's just so many more eyes that people are. It seems like the fan base for drag is holding each other a little more accountable, which we love, than they were when this necessarily started. I'm not sure this it definitely does still need to be said, but it's so much less urgent than it felt at the time. There are a lot of platforms that are talking about this.
And now Drag Race is kind of begrudgingly being forced to.
Yeah, again.
Slightly more close up. You have anything? I can move on. You got something, I know you do.
Me?
Yeah.
Who, me? I would say that I think that we're seeing a lot more conversation about inclusivity in the mainstream, but I don't know that we're actually seeing the representation of the people who haven't been represented.
Yeah.
So the conversation is happening in the mainstream, and I think that that's fantastic, and I think we are seeing it happen. But I think where the change is really occurring is in the local level. So like, I think that people are paying attention to inclusive drag scenes. I think people are changing their lineups. And I think that lineups in Brooklyn look really different than they did 5 years ago, 1000%. And you know, Switch and Play was doing the thing. But now everybody's lineups look that way, you know, and for nightgowns to sort of amplify that as well, even further, is changing the face of who actually is on stage and who's represented and who's represented as important and not just in a supporting role, you know? And I think that that's powerful, but I think that it's not in the mainstream quite yet, you know?
There's something very specific about this that could not have been created under a mainstream gaze, and the fact that this is the work of a local drag scene is entirely defining to it, I think.
And entirely defining to, I think, our politics and the way that we see drag, because we were coming into drag kind of as we were creating this, too, which I think is interesting. Malice, you asked a really great, we took a car ride together yesterday evening, and Malice had a great question that I wanted to put to the panel. She said that throughout each issue, Velour models and makes visible many forms of artistic collaboration that happen within our own drag and queer communities, and even charts out new forms of collaboration to expand the genre of drag. So I'd like to invite our panelists to comment on places where you see this happening or the value of this collaboration within our community.
Something that I would like to speak on is not just like the collaboration that happens artistically, but the collaboration that happens in our relationship as people and friends. You know, I always share this story that, you know, there was a time when I needed to move out of my apartment, and I had been a mess, and I hadn't taken care of the things that I needed to take care of. And when I needed someone to reach out to, both Johnny and Sasha were there for me. So, you know, to me, this project is just so much more than art, although it is beautiful art. And it to me, that's like the ultimate collaboration. And it's something that I'm very invested in. And like, the older you get, and you know, the more things you've done, that like you get to, you know, interact with these artists and, you know, build relationships and build friendships and build sisterhoods with these artists. And to me, like, that's such a beautiful collaboration.
It was like inevitable during this project, because you like, I don't know, realizing that your friends are more talented at some things than you are, and like that a group and community, like each person is truly a star and more deserving of opportunities that you might get than you are even. And so I think this, we called this, and also in that first editor's letter, I was rereading it today, we called it a love letter. And I love that too, because it's not just to drag in general, it's to specific people that have inspired us. And I think when, it's not like it doesn't have to be a self-lowering thing. Like, you can believe you're fucking amazing too, but when you know that the people around you are just as worthy and just as talented, if not more so, then you fight to make sure that everything includes them, because you know it'll be a better project because of their involvement. And that's why there's collaboration in this. It's the way that it is the best quality.
I think in so much of drag we draw on each other's talents, you know, in just even in creating our looks, we draw on each other's help and talents and things like that to make that sort of thing happen. And so we tried to echo that also in the book by having April work with Untitled Queen, having like two visual artists, one of them a drag queen, one not a drag queen, and putting them together and watching their shared heritage and watching their artistic expression grow together to create something really specific felt like an act of drag in itself, in the way that we were putting it in the book. I have a Sasha question. I've got like 10 minutes left. Should I do this last question or something from the audience? What do you think? Okay, I'll take like 2 audience questions if anyone has any.
Seems that you are on your way to building a drag empire. How good does that feel? Just knowing that you are paving the way for maybe all these kids that feel like Drag Race is exciting and it's cute and fun and it's great to have this exposure, but it still doesn't, like hearken to who you are inside because it's still cisgendered RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is you.
Yeah, well, I'm constantly in doubt about everything I'm doing, so it doesn't. I'm not gonna be like, it feels amazing. I'm like always worried. We're always worried about what the next step is, including this. We've been like engaged in conversations for months about what are we doing next with Velour Drag Magazine. What does it need to be? But I think I do want to say we are fighting for the community in every way through making beautiful things, which is what we know how to do, and. I think queers know that work can be political and can fight for our rights and our representation. I want you all to know that we will continue to do that, and there can be an issue 4. I think it'll be hardcover and gorgeous, just like this.
It may take a couple of years, but we just like this.
But yeah, the if there is a chance for us to build an empire, though we won't use that word. Dangerously problematic history. It's gonna continue to uphold the message and the politics
build a co-op
that we share.
So, Johnny, you mentioned we're collecting our queer history through this magazine. I'm working in queer archives, doing my master's thesis on that. So I was wondering if you guys think it's necessary that we have to collect our queer history, or is that the inevitable kind of decision?
I feel like you have to make a conscious decision to do it. I remember we used the archives here when looking at stuff. We were it was always a part of the mission that each issue would have something historical in it. So in the first issue we have Jen Camper's comics from the 80s, which have this like biting dark comedy, and we're like, you know what, internet kids did not invent this kind of comedy. There were like mean dykes doing it in the late 80s, and like putting it on the page was amazing. Including that, or like going through Linda Simpson's My Comrade, which is a scene from the late 80s and early 90s, which is kind of a beacon of joy in a community ravaged by AIDS at the height of the crisis here in the city. And going through the archives and looking at it, and then meeting Linda and getting the originals and photocopying them in the book. And it was always a part of the mission of this, but I feel like that's when we first created this. The stories that we wanted to tell it just seemed so urgent, and I think Sasha and I have been talking a lot that like the thing that seems most urgent now is doing that, is collecting the history, is doing the diligence and finding the sources and putting that in a book.
I will say that it's hard though, because my thesis project for grad school was a comic book about the Stonewall riots, and I tried to do a lot of primary source reading on it. And a couple of the biggest histories did primary source interviews, but only with white gay men about the Stonewall riots. So it's like, there actually aren't that many primary sources that aren't that. And because people made decisions in the past about whose voices were worth recording, it actually affects our sense looking back of what the history even is. So that was something we're mindful with about here. We have to make better choices about whose voice to record, and we have to maybe do a bit of guessing and imagining to create a more accurate picture of what the queer past looks like, which is perfect because that's what drag performers do best. So I think we will be the ones leading the way to this historical uncovering, like you said, but it's urgent.
Yeah, I think that's most pressing right now, especially as there are people still alive who were showgirls with the Jewel Box Review, or people who worked at Finocchio's in San Francisco and things like that. And it's like, these people need to be interviewed, and we need to talk about those experiences, and people who were at the Compton riots, and put that together. I feel like you have to like fight for it, you have to look for it, you have to reach out to people. I remember trying to get a hold of Lady Chablis for the second issue. It was like a year before her death. We were like, I sent someone to her show, sent her flowers, sent a copy of the magazine, and her health wasn't in a place where we could do an interview with her. But I was just like desperate because the only written thing, she was in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and then she had a book, but it was written so long ago, and like the way that we think about gender and drag had changed so much when we were like desperate to record that, and we didn't get a chance. But I think that's the work to be done.
Said sometime before about photographers and modern image being obsessed with like the transformation moving like out of drag into drag, and I'm a photography student myself, so I've noticed a lot like between my professors and some of the people who are my peers who aren't necessarily understanding of gender rather than sexuality have found their own obsession with that, and in photographing a specific body type of like cis white like buff men. And so I just was wondering, because I know it makes me feel as like a non-binary person very not as safe as I could be in my own community. So I was wondering how, and this is for everyone, you know, like how that makes you feel personally.
Is the question how cis white male person makes you feel?
I mean, the obsession with that type of transformation, focusing on those bodies.
Or the obsession of trying to use
A binary?
and like trying to use that as a stepping stone to launch yourself into mainstream media to make yourself successful, while stepping on other people who
Stepping
need
on
their
their art.
own voice.
Because there is,
And they're not a part of that.
because within drag there is a pressure to look like X out and like Y in. I think that is, I mean, that also limits how people are meant to look at their end result of drag too, because it's meant to be like a gender reversal in some way, if that is that is so often what people want to document the transformation. So yeah, it's very exclusionary, and I think it has pushed a lot of performers to try to market themselves in terms of that legibility, because that is necessary to be understood or to achieve success. So the more kinds of art we can put out there, the more kinds of representation we can put out that doesn't bring that to the foreground, I think is good for everyone.
Not focusing on that, because it's like, it's getting ready for work. It's like, it's not that interesting. It's like, this isn't the thing that you need to be taking pictures of. I think it's
A desire, yeah, it always seemed a little problematic to me, like a desire to pin down a reel that is legible, a real me that is legible to someone other than myself, which doesn't feel necessary at all. Like I can determine what is real for me and then dramatize that. So yeah, I've never liked in getting photographed in the process of putting on my makeup, even though I had 6 weeks of that being filmed. I also can't like talk while I'm putting on makeup because I get so focused.
We also know whose gaze those photos are for, right? So that like, however it's being sort of presented as like a gender fuck situation, these are actually the images that make, you know, a cis-het audience feel most comfortable, right? And so that's one reason why it feels so shitty, and I think that anything we can do to challenge this really tired idea of transformation and like what it looks like to be in drag and out of drag for so many different types of queer people who are engaging with this is really powerful.
Yes.
I kind of wish like any drag performer that somebody's like, oh, I'd love to like take pictures of your process, would be like, fuck you, no. Like, you don't need that, the world doesn't need that, like, who is that for?
That being said, I mean, that doesn't come from like
Big
an
Brandon
evil
did that in the first
place.
issue, so.
I think there's just not enough of asking why things are done a certain way over and over again. And so people just repeat the same patterns, not with ill intention
Not
or
maliciously, yeah.
but it just perpetuates.
Yeah, I think it also, it's had something to do with legibility and like the power that comes with legibility.
Yeah.
When I first started doing drag in Virginia, I was always kind of a performative person. I would be like the wildest dancer at a bar, etc. And you know that person. But nobody would really take my feelings seriously in nightlife until I started doing drag. And when I got on stage and people could like legibly read me as like, oh, that is an opulent Asian woman adjacent to white beauty, like lip syncing something very Celine Dion, you're like, oh, I feel you, like I see your humanity. and I thought more about that. I'm just like, oh, this is how I always feel. Like what is here is just like a visual aid, you know. So the transformation. I mean, when people focus on portraiture of transformation, it says more about the photographer than it really says about the subject, right? So I don't know. This is how I feel, and sometimes I will translate it if I have the right stuff lying around.
Like a chicken.
We do have to wrap things up. I would like to tell one quick story. So the first launch party that we did for this at Bazaar Bushwick, the owners were so impressed by the show that we put on, which is basically a switch and play takeover that was like all switch and play people, that they invited, and us, we performed a lot, I performed with you. They asked us to put on a show. I was leaving town, Sasha got to do the show, and that became Nightgowns. And I think one of the performances they were most interested in was Pearl Harbor tearing a chicken asunder using nothing but her feelings, a roasted chicken, on stage in drag, taking a bite of a raw onion. And it was one of the most moving and incredible things I'd ever seen, that we had to figure out how to get the chicken grease off the stage. And I think I really can credit that moment as people seeing that and then also looking at us and being like, oh, you're good at picking out stuff. You're good at putting on a show, you know who to look at. So thank you for that chicken piece. I think that's all the time we have in this room. If you want to join us at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division up on the second floor, we'll have copies of the book available. Sasha will be signing. We've got some time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Today for Sasha Velour, Ohni Lisle, Pearl Harbor, Thank you for spending your Sunday night with us.
I did.